Hello, and welcome to That Nerd Thing, where we uncover the magical impact that fandoms have on our lives. I'm Morgan, and today is an extra special bonus episode of That Nerd Thing. I am just so excited. I am joined by Pam from Millennial, and you may remember that Pam was on That Nerd Thing a few weeks ago, and we had a little short discussion about Bridgerton in that episode. So as soon as I finished the 4 episodes of Bridgerton Season 3, Part 1, I immediately reached out to Pam and I was like, I need you back on the show so we could talk about Bridgerton. And she said yes, and I'm just so excited that she's here today. Now, before we jump in, I do want to warn everyone that this episode will contain spoilers for Bridgerton. Everything is on the table from seasons 1, 2, and 3. Well, part 1, because only the first 4 episodes are out right now. And just like Bridgerton, this episode is definitely going to be explicit with some of the things that we talk about. So please keep all of that in mind before listening. This is your spoiler warning, so if you don't know why we watched the carriage scene like 50 million times, now's your time to shut off this episode, go watch Bridgerton, and then you can come back. All right, let's jump in. Welcome back, Pam. You are the first returning guest on That Nerd Thing.
Oh, wow. I'm so honored. I'm honored that you asked me in the first place, and I'm honored you wanted me to come back. Also, I appreciate your warning, because I was thinking about coming on this episode and I was like, okay, how classy do we got to keep this? I mean, it is Bridgerton, so there's like some level of class, but also it's a pretty explicit show. So
oh yeah, for sure. There are some things that I think we both have learned over the weekend about the show that we have to talk about it.
We got to talk about it.
Now, have you read the books?
I have only read Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, which is the book that the Pollen season is based off of. And I specifically did that because Colin and Penelope have always been like, I guess like the couple for me. My best friend has read all of them. And I remember watching the first season of Bridgerton when it came out during COVID, the COVID dark times. And right away, you could tell that this was definitely like unrequited love on her part. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, but they have such a sweet little rapport. Like, am I supposed to be shipping this? Or am I off here on my shipping spidey senses? I texted my best friend and I was like, am I supposed to be like intrigued by this relationship that I feel like is blossoming? And she's like, oh yeah. She's like, they have a book. And I was like, great, this is fantastic. So then after that, I was like, I'm just going to keep like, an eye on the developing relationship there. And so after season 2 finished, they had that explosive ending. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I got to read the 4th book because that's their story. And I just needed to know what happened because it was just like, so like, I think we all watched that scene where Colin says he would never dream of courting her. And my heart sank. I felt so bad for her in that moment. And I was like, I can't wait. I need to know how this resolves. So that's the only book I've read.
Yeah, I haven't read the books, but I, on Twitter, I have an idea of what future seasons have in store for us. But I guess we don't really have to talk much about that. I don't want to spoil it. So initial reactions. What did you think after finishing the first 4 episodes? I have like notes of reactions.
Yeah, I was so nervous for this season because they took a break from the initial Bridgerton storyline to give us Queen Charlotte, which I was like not super excited about at first, and obviously ended up loving that too. Yep. So I feel like a lot was riding on this season, and I really loved it. I think I even told you when we were talking the first time I was on your show that I just love the friends to lovers trope. I think that it's God tier for me. I know that enemies to lovers is having a moment right now. And I know fake dating is like on the rise as well. I love a fake dating trope too. But there's something that is so sweet about friends to lovers. And I think it's because there is like a shared history there. And there's something so beautiful about watching 2 people fall in love that have seen like every iteration of themselves, past and present, and the fact that they still choose to be together and like love each other despite any flaws or faults that they've seen in the past is just so beautiful to me. Like that is the stuff to me that like great love stories are made of. So I love that. I love the yearning and the longing and the slow burn.
Oh,
so
I love the slow burn. That's why I love season 2.
This was definitely, but it's different.
Yeah.
It's like a different slow burn with enemies to lovers. And also with Anthony and Kate, since we only meet Kate at the beginning of season 2, like it's more like a sexually charged yearning, right?
That's a good point.
And like a longing. Yeah. So it's way different.
Yeah. I know some people are saying they felt like it was rushed, but I don't think it was rushed because we had season 1 and season 2 for the build up. So I think it made perfect sense.
I agree. And I think a lot of those people need to go back and watch. I get it, because when you're in a season and you want to focus on the main couple, it's so tempting to just like gloss over everything else that's happening. But for Colin and Penelope specifically, you really need those touchstones to truly understand what a fantastic job they did kind of bringing us to this moment. So I understand in a way why people feel like it was rushed, but it really wasn't if you think about the trajectory of their arc over the course of the entire series.
Yeah. So I watched it twice, and I will say I enjoyed it so much more rewatching it. And I think that was because on the first watch, I really, really wanted more Kate and Anthony. I love them so much. And, I figured that, they're not going to be the focus, but I was really, really hoping to see more, but I get it. And I realized I like more angst. And I think when you have that friends to lovers, it was a little bit more lighthearted. But then in some of the later episodes, I think 3 and 4, or after that kiss, which I'm sure we'll talk about, it started building up. And that's when I was like, okay, wait, I really like this. And then the second watch, knowing what was coming, and I was able to focus and pay attention to different things, I loved it so much more. So once I got over missing Kate and Anthony, I really, really loved it. It was so good.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
That's so, because they're such a different couple.
Right.
Way different from Kate and Anthony. And so I understand. I know there's so many Kate and Anthony fans, but I understand why for people that really stand hard for season 2, it's so hard to get into season 3 and to really catch on to the intricacies. I also agree with you. I enjoyed it the first time around, but getting to watch it the second time, you really kind of start to see a lot of these tiny little details they slip in there that really bring the story to life in a different way. I'm sure you've also been seeing a lot of like the reactions online and stuff. And one of the big ones that people have been really lobbing onto is this idea that like Colin gives them the ick, and it's like that's the point, because he's like that's not him, and he is only his true self when he has this shift with Penelope, who's always been able to see him for who he is. He's always been able to be himself around her.
Exactly.
And as soon as he starts falling for her, all of that armor that he's built up around himself to make himself socially acceptable starts falling off. And it's incredible the way that they did that. And shout out to Luke Newton, because his acting it's so subtle, but so superb.
So
and you
good.
can really kind of see it in like the eyes and in the face, the way that he kind of slowly slips into like more and more of a torturous spiral downwards until we get, kind of to the end.
I have in my notes that I wrote, I love Colin's douche arc. Because I loved it.
Yeah,
I thought
know.
It made so much sense. Like the winking and and, like the threesomes, and then like flirting with other girls. Like I loved it. I thought that was perfect for his character journey.
I have so much to say about the threesomes too, because they're so jarring. But I think that we needed to see that because the contrast, the juxtaposition between how he behaves, like in the brothel setting, which by the way, like I also think it's interesting that we only ever see him have threesomes, which are like, that is like a fantasy, right? It's not real. It's not like with Anthony where he was just with Sienna.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he kisses Penelope once and he's like, this is what it's supposed to feel like. All of this was just like nothing.
Yes. And I love that after that kiss, he was like, okay, I'm ready Or no, actually, after in the carriage, he's like, okay, let's get married. Because I think that is in line with what he's like. Like we saw that in season 1 with Marina, where he was just like ready to marry her immediately. So I think like, okay, this makes sense. I saw a really funny tweet and someone's like, well, I need to stop watching these shows. Otherwise, I'm going to be single forever because my standards like just keep getting higher and higher. And I just laughed out loud when I read that. So I was like, yeah.
It's so true. But also like the bar is so low in general, I will say, because I think that like what pretty much what all these men have in common is first of all, they're written by women. And
I know,
like,
right?
So if like any man is listening, you want to know what women want, you should just read and watch stuff like this. The season 3 also, don't quote me on this, but I believe it's the first season of Bridgerton that has a female showrunner attached. And I think that you can see that too in the way that the romance kind of builds up. But I would also say that going back to my initial point, it's like all these men are like, they're kind and they're devoted and like that's it, right? It shouldn't be so hard. Like it's so sad that like that's the high standard.
Overall, what did you think of the Featheringtons? They made me laugh so much. I thought it was hilarious.
So good. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Like they're pitch perfect.
Yeah.
I really love that they hammered home just how little women are allowed to know, and then how that kind of comes back to bite everyone in the ass, right? Like that whole scene where Portia is expecting her daughters to give her a grandson, and like they don't even know anything about sex. It was the funniest
I know.
thing.
Oh my gosh. Those scenes were the best. I loved it. What did you think of Francesca's storyline?
So I have no real touchstone for Francesca in the books because, like I said, I've only read the 4th one. But I heard that she is quite different on the show. I just think that she was so sweet.
Me too.
And so quiet. And it was just like, I think that it would have been so easy for the show to make her kind of like another mini Daphne and have Eloise be the only black sheep of the sisters. Because in contrast, I don't know why I said Felicity. Hyacinth. I think the actress news. Anyway, never mind. Hyacinth cannot wait to like be a debutante, right? And yeah, I just think that it would have been so easy to make Francesca somebody that was behaving similarly or was excited to come out and be amongst the marriage mart and stuff like that. So the fact that she wasn't, she just wanted to play her music.
I loved that.
I thought it was the sweetest thing.
I love that. And I actually got a comment. Liza, who is also a fellow millennial listener, commented that she loves the moment when the queen admired the piano playing for the player's own joy. And I really liked that too. Mm-hmm. I liked that Francesca was really just about the music. And I liked that she was so different. And I really liked her view on marriage too. I was like, oh, this is a different perspective than what we've seen so far in the show.
Yeah, yeah. And it's also interesting too that she's like, I just want silence. I just want to be still.
Yeah.
And I feel like that says a lot about, to your point about marriage, what she's looking for in a partner, what she values. She just wants the comfort of being able to exist in the same space and not have to say anything at all. And that's really lovely.
Yeah. I loved the Queen Charlotte, and it just reminded me that I really would love season 2 of Queen Charlotte. I just love every scene with her in it. She's just so fascinating to me.
She is. Yeah. I'm wondering too, and this is maybe getting ahead of the conversation, but I'm wondering if she's going to start upping the ante a little bit in the back half of season 3, because she's been kind of like playing a little bit on the outskirts this season. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's because she's, they had her starting off as kind of sort of licking her wounds because her big plan to uncover Whistledown has not succeeded as of yet. And yeah, it's like I feel like she's like a different Queen Charlotte this time around. Mm-hmm. I loved too that like when they were presenting the debutantes, she was like yawning in their faces. She's not just bored. It's too much of the same. I've seen one beautiful girl. I've seen them all.
Love that. Yeah, she's so funny. She's such a great actress. Mm-hmm. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about each of the episodes. So episode 1 is called Out of the Shadows. The debutantes enter the marriage mart as Francesca navigates her first season out. A well-traveled bachelor returns and Penelope unveils a new look. That's a pretty good summary for that episode.
I think so. I think they touch on all the big parts.
Yeah. So what did you think overall of that episode? I mean, I liked all 4. I feel like I'm, that's how I am though. When I like things, I kind of like love everything and I don't really recognize any flaws until I read about it online and I was like, oh, so Today's episode's going to be a love fest, I think.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, but I think that that's okay. I think this is my whole thing about that. I think it's okay to just like things.
Yeah.
I don't think you always have to have a negative opinion about something. And I think you probably wouldn't want to do this episode if you hated... Well, you might want to do it if you hated all of it, but you probably wouldn't want to do it if you just hated part of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's true.
So it has to be like one extreme or the other extreme.
Yeah.
I'm all for loving things, though. I feel like it just makes things more fun.
Yeah.
You can just gush about them.
I loved the music in the episode. I loved Penelope's outfit reveal and then the song choice behind it. It was so good. And it also reminded me of Rose from Titanic. I don't know, like I immediately thought of her in the staircase. What did you think of her outfit?
Yeah, and I think it's because she has the same coloring and stuff like that. I want to back it up a little bit too. Like, I think that one of the things that we've been seeing a lot in the interviews that are coming out of this is that season 3 is really kind of like a rom-com. And I think you can see that even in the beginning when she realizes that she needs to get married and she just like tosses her head up and looks to the sky after her mom says, I'm so comforted by the fact that I'll always have you.
I know.
And it was so incredible.
I was like, oh, I feel you. I could see how she was just like, I need to get out of this.
Yeah. But I also think that I think something that the season does well from the beginning is that it pairs these really funny moments with these little pockets of like heartache, because she's out there, trying to remake her whole wardrobe right before she even comes down the staircase. And the modiste asks her what she wants in a partner. And all Penelope can say is, I want to be sensible.
I know. Oh,
because that's all she's been conditioned to believe her whole life, is that the best she can hope for is any man who will have her and someone who will tolerate her. And that love is not in the cards for her at all. And I think that makes sense in relation to the fact that her parents clearly were in a loveless marriage. Yeah. But it's also tragic that as a mother, Portia doesn't want more for her children, I know. And constantly reminds her that she's not worth more than what she can manage to get.
Yeah. And I also think it's the confidence in herself that also changed things a bit. And even though she said to somebody who's kind and sensible, I still think she had that bit of hope, because she's something like what they wear in Paris. And that's where Colin was. So I think there's still a part of her that really always hoped and didn't give up.
Yeah, and I think part of that too is that she sees how much confidence he comes back with. And even though she knows him well enough to kind of see right through the act, I assume she's thinking, if Colin can fake it till he makes it, then I can too. And maybe all I need is some Paris fashion. So I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. That was my thought process.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think, that does make a lot of sense. Huh. I immediately was like, oh, she still wants to impress him or wants to draw his attention.
I feel like she's seriously done with him. He's completely shattered her heart. And that I think that was the moment that she decided she was going to give up on him. I think that she knows part of herself will probably always love him, but she's completely shut off the fantasy of, hope that maybe one day he'll notice her.
Yeah. Oh, I kind of want to do a rewatch now with that perspective. It's interesting. I loved when she was coming down the stairs and what's his name? It was Philippa's husband, I think. And he's like, it's not us they stare at. And he just looked so happy. And I was like, oh, that's a genuine bond. I love the relationship that Penn has.
What a supportive brother-in-law.
I know. I loved that. I thought that was really sweet.
That whole ballroom scene too is so great, because again, it really drives home this idea that she can change her hair and her clothes, but she's still herself.
Yeah.
And herself is a little bit awkward, a little bit bumbling. And I'm sure that so many people just saw themselves or a version of their past selves in her, just trying to awkwardly talk to 3 lords at the same time.
I know. Oh, she was great.
And she, why would she know how to navigate that? Because her mom has never thought that she would need any guidance, and she obviously assumed she was never going to get married.
I know.
And then also she's never had any attention. The only man she really knows how to talk to is Colin, and that's because they've always had this friendship. It's way different.
Right.
Even when she was nervous, she still was able to communicate well with him. So
yeah. I really also just loved her dress so much. I thought it was so beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
The layering too, like I didn't realize in the trailer, because the trailer we just kind of get like this flash that there was like a bronze layer underneath it until Cressida rips the tulle off the top, and then you kind of see like just how beautiful it is underneath too.
Yeah.
The costuming on the show is incredible.
Oh, I love it. And I love how Colin also pointed that out to her, like what that color suits you before she left. I loved it. I loved the embroidery conversation with Eloise. I thought that was really funny. I love how Eloise is still showing that she cares. And it's like a complex friendship issue rather than just her totally cutting her off.
Yeah, that was so interesting. I don't know if this is in this episode or if it's in the next one, but I thought it was interesting that it might have been in episode 2 that she tells Colin that she doesn't want him to stop talking to her because he's all she has left.
Yeah.
And I think that you're right. That shows like genuine love, even though she can't bear to be friends with her after what happened and what she discovered.
Yeah. I loved Penn calling Colin out. I'm glad like we got that in early on in the season and it wasn't like a build up. Like she immediately told him. I was really glad like she found her voice and said that.
I don't know if you've read up on the differences from the books to
a little bit.
Like the screen. Yeah. But in the books, that conversation, he actually makes that comment to Benedict and Antony. And it happens outside the Bridgerton house.
Oh.
And yeah, so I think it's like, even though people hear and it's in public, I do think it's interesting that all the older brothers at least are very aware of why they're on the outs.
Interesting.
Because of that.
I wonder why they made that change.
Yeah. I think because they really wanted to drive home what a slight it was to her reputation in society. And I did like in the book that when she hears it, she tells Colin, I never asked for you to court me and I never expected you to court me. And then he tries to apologize and she says that it's not necessary because there was like no offense made. And then she turns to Benedict and says, I don't want to marry Benedict. That doesn't offend you. Benedict does it. And he's like, no. And then Antony walks her home because Colin's like, you can't go across the street unchaperoned. And she's like, well, I don't want to go with you either. So
oh, wow.
That's how that plays out.
Interesting.
But I do think that the way that they did it on the show gives her a moment to call him out. And she does. I enjoy the way they did in the book, but for the sake of television and making it a bigger explosion, I do really like the way that they did it that way. And she really got to say her piece.
Yeah, I loved that. She was so good this season. So I wrote down a couple of quotes from this episode that I was just like, come on, really? This is a love confession where he's like, where Colin says to Penn, you make me see the world in ways I cannot possibly imagine or have imagined or something like that. And then he's like, you're the one person who has always truly made me feel appreciated. And then he's offering to teach her how to find a husband. Like, does he not hear the words coming out of his mouth? I was just laughing as I heard it.
There's this one TikToker I follow. I can't remember his name, but he always calls him Colin Can't Catch a Clue Bridgerton.
That's hilarious.
It's so true. But I think part of it, too, is that he just like, and so while I do think what he said about her and the tone in which he said about it was quite cruel, I do also kind of wonder if what he meant to say, and this is giving him way more grace than he probably deserves because he still should have defended his friend, right? I do kind of wonder if what he was really saying was like, I wouldn't dream of courting Penelope because like, A, she's my friend, but also I don't want to get married right now. I think he's, in a lot of ways, he's still kind of, at least in season 2, he's still kind of like licking his wounds about the whole Marina thing. And that's why we get that scene where he goes to seek her out to try and bury the hatchet. And yeah, I think that a lot of the allure of finding a love match has lost its shine because he was already fooled once and ended up making a bit of a mockery of himself because he was so public about announcing that engagement that didn't end up going through. So
I think he's also still just trying to find himself. We see with just what he's been doing with exploring and going to all these cities that he still doesn't really even know who he is. And I'm pretty sure they're both young or supposed to be pretty young in the show. like early 20s.
Yeah, in the show she's 19 and he's 22. In the books she's 27 and he's 33. So I think in the books it does the pressure, the marital pressure aspects that we don't see too much this season, but we have seen in past seasons between like Violet and all of her eligible sons and daughters is way more apparent in the books because they are so much older. Yeah. And I think they probably kept them aged down, first of all, because they started them off so young in the show, but then also because I think that it wouldn't have been as impactful having come off of season 2 where Kate is a spinster and she's 27. So that would put Penelope at the same age as her if they had followed that age trajectory from the novels.
Yeah. Speaking of Kate, I feel like we have to talk about my favorite couple because this is the only episode they showed up in, Kate and Anthony. Oh my gosh, I love them so much.
Marital bliss looks so good on them.
Yeah, and what did he say? What are they doing? Making an heir? Oh my gosh. And he's like, we have to start somewhere. I love that.
Yeah, I know. I love how playful Jonathan Bailey has made Anthony in this season because he spends all of second season uptight and tense. And so I think that playing him more playful this season really works in terms of selling that marital bliss. And also like she is so beautiful too. Simone Ashley, she's just like stunning.
Yeah. I love them. And then they're talking about extending their honeymoon and I was like, yes, but no, can't you show it on the screen?
Now you're gonna leave.
Yeah. I was like, oh, so this.
Do you think they'll be back? I think they're gonna be back for part 2, though.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll see. Yeah, them again.
I'm not getting my hopes up. I'm like, they'll probably just be in one episode. But I know I love them so much. It's so funny. There's one song that whenever I listen to, I just think of Anthony, especially because of season 2. And it's because of one line in the song. It's Cruel Summer from Taylor Swift. And it's where it's like he looks up grinning like a devil. And I'm like,
oh, yes. He does that well.
Yeah. All right. So now we are going to talk about episode 2, and it's called How Bright the Moon. So the Netflix description here is that Penelope begins her private lessons in charming suitors, but the arrangement quickly grows complicated. A dazzling debutante seizes the queen's attention.
Oh, wait, hold on. We might have to go back a little bit more.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you a question. So the other thing that I've seen a lot of people debate is whether or not Colin groveled enough to win Penelope's friendship back. And I know that happens in season 1, so I feel like we got to talk about, or episode 1, so I feel like we got to talk about it before we move on. Like, did you feel like that apology sufficed when he comes to the garden?
I'm trying to put myself in her shoes. I mean, I think it's a genuine apology. He's saying sorry. She clearly loves him. So I think it makes sense that she's ready to just move on and move forward. But I mean, I'm sure as viewers, we want to see that build up, that angst, that apology, because that's exciting. But I think for the characters, it does make sense, especially if they've been friends for so long.
I agree with you. I think you hit the nail on the head. For me, it's partially the friendship angle that they've known each other for so long. And so when you are friends that long, you don't want to forgive easily, but it is easier to forgive and to give people a second chance especially if that's like the only time they've really slighted you. The other thing that I can't stop thinking about is that I just feel like because she's decided that she can't love him anymore because there's no hope there, right? And because he's never known or never realized. He might be like the last person to ever realize that she's been in love with him this whole time. I just feel like she can't really show her cards very much there because she can only say that she was hurt so much. If she goes too far in that direction, then she shows all her cards, and that's really vulnerable.
That's a really good point. That's so true. And then, so interesting. So in this episode, did she then run back regretting what she wrote in Lady Whistledown?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's also important to talk about because it's so crazy that all it takes is, and he doesn't know it's Penelope, but all it takes is her seeing through the facade for it to falter. And again, this is such good acting on Luke Newton's part because you see it in his face the way that he almost looks terrified of the fact that somebody may have found out that he's not this person that he's come back as. He's molded himself into, you know, hot man on campus, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then here's Lady Whistledown poking holes in his ship, no pun intended, right? And that scares him because he doesn't know if other people will catch on too.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if that's some foreshadowing at the end of episode 1 where he said something like, if they find out who she is or whatever, ruin her life or whatever. And I was like, okay, we'll see.
That was pretty funny. Yeah. He's like, I shall ruin her.
Yeah,
it's like, well, you did, but not like that.
Let's see. Episode 2. So something I just want to point out that I thought was interesting that I didn't catch until I actually saw it online somewhere is that Edwina made a splendid match abroad.
Yeah. I would have liked to have seen her come back, but that does tie up a nice little loose end. And it makes everyone feel a little bit better because she did get the short end of the stick last season, even though she was so gracious about it.
So we shall dance on the day of her demise. I have that quote that I think Colin said this some way. And I was like, I feel like this will have foreshadowing, but not in a bad way. I feel like this will have some sort of other meaning. You know how sometimes there's lines that have a different meaning that maybe we didn't really think about in a later episode? I feel like this will happen somehow.
Well, yeah. I mean, like maybe like you're right. Maybe demise is not being used in the way he thinks it is. Maybe demise in like for future just means that the secret is demolished, right?
Oh yeah. Oh, that's so funny. My mind just went to sex.
Oh, well, that too.
Yeah. I love tension. I think that's why I also like the slow burn. I like that build up. Let's just jump to it. That kiss scene at the end of episode 2. At first I was like, do I want them to kiss? Do I want him to kiss her? Because I had a lot of that in season 2 where they were about to kiss and I was like, no, don't kiss. It's not right yet. And I was glad when they didn't, how it took a while. But I was like, wow, they're kissing so soon in this season. And it was so romantic.
It was, that is a beautiful kiss. And I love the way that they did this in contrast to how it is in the books, because in the books, it's way more passionate. And I think that there's more like lust involved. It's more sexually charged, but I think that it needed to be sweet the way it was in the show. And again, like going back to these brothel scenes, which feels so out of character for the Colin that
I thought it was Benedict at first.
Me too. I was like, Benedict would. Yeah. Benedict has, you know? But to that point, I think that that's why he's doing it. Because he's like, I got to be like Benedict and Anthony, you know, in order to be like popular in society and like take my place and find my purpose, which is not the case, but he doesn't know that at that point in his life. But yeah, the contrast to like those scenes and like how, you know, he kisses Penelope once because she asks him, and then all of a sudden his world turns upside down. I don't think that would have been as poignant if it hadn't been soft and very sweet.
Yeah. And I loved how she's just said like, thank you, and turned around and like, that was her way of moving on. And I also was laughing so much at the little banter before where she was like, oh, I could be dead tomorrow. And he's like, and then she's like, it would, I don't know. And then he's like,
you would already be dead.
I was like, oh my God, I love this. This is so funny.
Yeah. The back and forth, the speed of that was so well done. Yeah. I totally agree.
And I think
that was peak rom-com.
Exactly.
Like, it's obviously we're watching something in the Regency era, but that is like, you could see that happening in like any era. You know, like that exact same conversation between two friends. It's like, I might die. You're not going to die. But what if I do?
I know. But I think it also just goes to show like the beauty of the friends to lover trope. Like this is the sort of stuff that you can get with that. I was cracking up so much at the pregnancy talk, and when Portia's like, what on earth do you and Mr. Finch do?
Oh my gosh, yes. But see, that's what she gets. Also, Violet does the same thing with Daphne in season 1. She sends her in blind.
I know.
Yeah, they just expect their husbands to know. Like, and I think that for the most part, men are conditioned, especially in high society, to kind of go sow their wild oats before they settle down and get married. And some of them continue sowing even after they get married to a respectable person. But like, you never think about like men of that era not knowing what sex is.
Yeah.
And so the fact that her husband, for whatever reason, just didn't realize or wasn't having sex with her is wild.
Oh my God, I know. I love those relationships. I know a lot of people don't like scenes with the Featheringtons, but I love them all. I think they're great.
Yeah, and I think that we kind of need them, especially in season 3, so that we kind of understand what Penelope is up against.
Oh, yeah.
too. And I think that they gave them more comedy this season, and I loved the tone of that as well.
Yeah.
I'm super curious to see how everything wraps up with the future of the Baron title.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of like looming over, and that gets dropped in the first episode that, you know, they clearly, Portia and Varley, Mrs. Varley, her housemaid is what her, I'm sure she has like a title, I just can't remember. But yeah, they clearly forged this document saying that everything will go to the first grandson, or like the first male heir that her daughters produce. And we kind of have conveniently forgotten about that, but I'm sure it's going to come back full force in the back half of this season. So it'll be interesting to see how that ties up.
What did you think when they were in, what is it called? Like the tea room? I don't know, where Colin was alone with her at first. And then she was saying how beautiful his eyes are. And then she goes and reads his journal, which, by the way, I love that she read it, because I mean, come on, it's right there. I don't blame her. I would probably do the same thing. So spot on.
Yeah, I loved that scene too. First of all, I just think it shows like how considerate he is. First of all, like everything they do is so improper. You know, they have to be alone. He's always like touching her without gloves on. And they've been operating this way for the past 2 seasons too. So going back to people saying that they felt like everything was rushed, is like these two have been acting fools together for so long. But I think that it's really sweet that he clearly listened to her about like where she felt most comfortable, and he set it up, he had it all set up for her in there. He had the lemonade set up. I think it was great to see Penelope disarm him for once, because usually it's the other way around, or it has been in what we've seen of the two of them. So I really liked the whole "your eyes" little speech that she tosses out there. And then the journal, again, I think you're right in the sense that season 3 is a season where a lot of the building blocks are more obvious when you rewatch it, because you start to see where they've kind of like left little clues for you to kind of really dig deeper into the character development.
Yeah.
Because in that passage she reads about his time in Paris, he specifically notes that something about how like he's like pondering on how one can experience intimacy but kind of like feel lonely at the same time, or like feel like something's missing. And it's like, of course it's missing, because like you're not in love, dude.
Yep.
That's the issue.
Yeah. And I love how she wasn't offended or upset at the writing about him writing about other women, but instead loved how he wrote and the quality of it. I was like, okay, yeah, she's a writer. It makes sense.
Yeah, she just appreciated the peek into his mind and into his thoughts, his private thoughts. That just really goes to show that a lot of how he's presenting himself is such an act, and probably a lot of what he like set out determined to experience the third time he goes off to travel was like specifically thought out so that he could come back brand new. And I also just think it's really sad that this is his third time traveling, and this is the only time we see people interested in hearing about his travel stories.
That is sad.
And like before, Penelope was the only one, and she probably he was still trying to write to her, and she just like wasn't writing back. He didn't know why.
Her. I was glad she didn't.
Yeah, good. I agree. But he like suddenly like lost the one person that actually genuinely cared about hearing how his traveling went. And like when he was coming back with like genuine stories about experiencing culture and people and seeing new things, nobody cared. And all of a sudden, all his friends, I will be a Colin Bridgerton defender until the day I die, Morgan. I feel like he gets so much hate, and I don't understand why.
I think he gets hate because of that comment in season 2, but I think it's part of, I mean, it makes sense. If he's somebody who's trying to fit in, of course he's going to try to fit in with everyone else and talk shit about Penelope too.
Yeah, exactly.
He's still learning himself. He's young. Not that it's an excuse, but it makes sense.
Yeah, even his own friends are like, you're so much more fun this year.
Yeah,
you've come back so much more fun. How tragic.
I'm like ready to get to the carriage scene, but okay, We'll hold off.
I'm like, fine, we'll wait. We'll go in order.
So I want to read a little bit more of some listener feedback. So Pink Hair Dreamer over on Threads said, Penelope Featherington shone so bright. And I have to agree. She really was the star of the season.
The first lesson in the park, I just wanted to call that out in terms of like fantastic acting on Nicola Coughlin's part. The whole like her whole interaction with the men that Colin walks her over to is so funny. And I just love how you can tell that she was like acting like how she's seen her mother act. Like it's Penelope doing Portia. And it's like it makes sense that she would, because that's probably like her mom. Who's going to give her lessons if not her mother?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And Colin also brought that up to Eloise when he was talking about why he is helping her, because she doesn't have a man in her life to help her learn how to find a husband. Mm-hmm. She's such a great actress. She's great. I hope the two of them are dating in real life. I'm definitely one of those people who love when actors get together.
Yeah. They have so much chemistry on screen and off screen. It's such a delight to watch. And it's like, it's so funny because obviously I'm in the media, so I get it. You know, we see actors up the ante for PR all the time, but I just think that like that's just the way they are together. Yeah. And you can tell that there's like so much genuine love. And like I know we keep bringing up the carriage scene. I just feel like scenes like that don't happen unless you implicitly trust the person that you're with.
Yeah.
And the person that you're acting opposite.
Yeah. And they've known each other for years, so they've known this was coming. So they were able to build that relationship outside of work.
Exactly.
All right. Should we move on to episode 3? I'm like, can we fast forward?
slowly inching closer.
All right. So episode 3 is called Forces of Nature. Netflix description says, Penelope catches the eye of nature-loving Lord Debling to the dismay of other admirers. A near catastrophe on a windy day makes a hero out of Colin.
This was a good episode.
This episode is when I really started liking it on my first watch, because we got more of that angst that I love so much. So it started out with that dream. So I'll be honest, I knew it was a dream. I feel like whenever you see that fog in a scene, you're like, okay, this is a dream. But what I did not realize is that it would be Colin's dream. That was a pleasant surprise for me.
That was good.
Yeah.
Because it's so romantic. That man thought of every detail in his dream.
I know.
I was sitting there, I was like, damn, he really is a writer. He's got her in this like beautiful robe, and there's like fog coming into your point. And I just think also it's so telling that in his dream is Penelope feeling the same way about him.
Yeah. Aw. That's true. And I love how in the morning, Benedict was asking how he was, and Colin's like, oh, I slept well, no dreams. And Benedict's just like, okay. so funny. I love the humor. I love the relationship between the two of them.
I wanted Benedict to rip on him a little bit more.
I know.
Especially because in my head, I just think it's so much funnier if like all the Bridgerton siblings also know that Colin is in love with Penelope even before he does.
I guess we'll find out in the next few episodes.
Yeah, I feel like Hyacinth definitely does, because I think it's so funny that she comes over and she's like, it's so nice that you're such a good friend to Penelope. And then he's like, I wouldn't call us friends. We're just acquaintances.
I know. Oh my God. Oh, so funny. Acquaintances.
Oh, man.
I laughed. We have the tree scene here where they were under the tree.
Oh my gosh. Yes. He was giving me like Hugh Grant in 90s rom-com vibes. Under this tree, just like the delivery and stuff like that. I don't know if that was like intentional or not. I was reading an interview where they both said that they were like, they would go home and watch rom-coms to research and to get inspired for the roles. I think that like one thing that is so apparent this season is that you can tell that Luke and Nicola really understand their characters so well, and also they understand the love story really well. And also you can see that they really cared a lot about bringing that to life in the best way possible. And I commend both of them for doing that, but I especially commend him, because I just think that it's so easy sometimes for male actors to come in and coast when it comes to the romance genre. And very often romance is not taken seriously by men because it's something that is catered and marketed towards women. And so the fact that Luke Newton cared so much, and like that comes across in like probably any interview you see online and click on, I just think that's so great. And I just like really appreciate seeing actors that like not only put in the work and do the homework, but like show up having done the extra credit and gone the extra mile. And I really just feel like that is why these episodes are so good. And that's why I have like so much hope for the back half of the season too.
Yeah, I think it's just like they nail the eye contact, the facial expressions, just the subtle little movements. I think that really just makes the scenes extra special.
But yeah, that scene under the tree is incredible. And I also love that he keeps like pushing her for a clear answer as to why they can't have lessons anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that like probably he's hoping that she'll say like, oh yeah, it's because like I felt too much during that kiss. Haha, have you been having dreams too? Like,
oh, I love them so much.
I know. They're so awkward and so cute. And you just want them to get together so bad.
I know. I'm like, oh, when is part 2 coming out?
We have a whole month.
Yeah. So this episode, I laughed out loud when we saw Lord Debling's face, and then it pans to, what is it? Like I hated seeing that too. What is like the dead animal head, and he's just like looking disgusted at it.
Yeah.
I was like, that's a great introduction to him. It made me laugh out loud. You know, I actually feel like him and Cressida would be a great practical match.
I think you're right. Because I think that she just wants to get married anyway. She would thrive with freedom. I don't think she's somebody that really like, I don't know, this could be me reading her wrong, but it always just, I feel like there's got to be a reason why she's unmarried, and it can't just be because she's a bully. Because you see that like most people don't even notice that she's done it, especially like towards somebody like Penelope. The only people that ever notice are Eloise, because that's her best friend, and Colin, because he genuinely cares about her.
Yeah. I feel like Cressida and Eloise have some chemistry, but I read that all of the characters, like in the author's contract for the show, like they have to end up with the original people that she wanted them to end up with. So
interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's true. I just read that online somewhere, but yeah, I would have loved a romance arc between Eloise and Cressida. I think that would have made sense. So let's talk about the cupcake.
Oh my God. That was so
I
good.
had to rewind it. It was like, wait a second, I need to watch this again. Like where he watches her. Yeah. And then you see him in a few scenes later eating like that same cupcake. And I was like, this is perfect.
He's so down bad.
Yeah.
And I think like we can't really tell, but I feel like he does it and he's like still looking in her direction as he's eating the same cupcake. He's like a man possessed.
And then the balloon scene. And, you know, there was a lot of laughing moments for me in this season because it's like, oh, this is so cheesy, but I love it. Like, of course, he runs with his muscles to pull down the balloon.
Of course, he has his sleeves rolled up because that's the sluttiest thing a man can do. And he's the only one.
I know.
Are we like in agreement that the reason Penelope was almost squashed by that balloon is because she was like openly gawking at Colin?
Yes, for sure. For sure. Because she's smart. She would have known to run sideways.
Yeah. She was also thirsting.
For
so
sure.
I like that we got a little bit of both of them thirsting this episode.
Oh, I loved that.
This is not when, oh no, that was last episode. I was going to say this is not when they find out. Well, like one of the big things that happens that leads up to all of this is that everybody finds out that he's been helping her find a husband.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why they can't communicate anymore openly.
Oh, yeah. How did we not mention that? Because I felt, oh my gosh, my heart, I just felt so bad for her. And then she was so upset. My heart was breaking for her. There were so many of those moments in these first 4 episodes.
Yeah, because she's trying and trying and trying so hard. And it feels like every time she tries, she fails. And on the other hand, though, I feel like the sting of failure is kind of what ends up making her more brave in a weird way, because the first time she fails, she asks Colin to kiss her, and that's incredibly brave, even though she insists that she wouldn't have, like, it wouldn't have to mean anything. But the fact that she asked that's not anything we would have seen Penelope do in season 1 or season 2. And her entire connection with Debling too also happens because she's been scorned once again by the Ton. And so she has nothing left to lose. But that allows her to show a little bit more of her true self or be more open, because what does she have to lose now? She's already, she's the laughing stock of the Ton 3 times over the course of just the first 4 episodes. So
I still don't really understand why it was a big deal that he was helping her.
I don't know either, because like everybody gets help, but I guess it's just because she's been on the market that sounds awful, but she's been out in society for 3 years already. And so I guess like it looks desperate and it's just not done. But also I think part of it too is that like she's been hanging out with an eligible bachelor basically. And so it's like, it's not really his role to begin with, because he kind of catches a little bit of heat from this, but not too much.
I love how Violet wants Francesca to find love. I know we haven't really spoken a lot about Francesca, and I'm sure more of that will come in the second half of the season, that relationship. But I love her and John and how they seem to get each other.
Yeah. I think it's so sweet. And I also love that as soon as Violet realizes that she's genuinely interested, she's just happy that she's felt a spark. Her daughter's felt a spark, because it seemed for a while that she was like really trying to get her to match with the Marquess. That's the one the Queen introduces her to, and also like a few other suitors before them. But after she wins the favor of the Queen, she's like, well, that'll be a good match because she'll only show her the best suitors.
I love Violet, and so this episode we're introduced to Lady Danbury's brother. I was like, yes, I want to see a Violet romance.
Yes. I know. I'm a little concerned about like why Lady Danbury does not care for her brother. But I also feel like they wouldn't pair Violet off with somebody that would be awful to her, or that would be like too sneaky.
Yeah. I want her to find love again.
Yeah, she wants to have her garden tended.
I also loved how Colin was asking Violet about like friendship being the foundation for love, because I think that also opens up Violet's eyes to what Colin is now starting to think.
Oh yeah, and she always knows too. Do you see, like, she looks at Penelope right away when he says that, even though he protests and says he was just asking on behalf of his sister, but she's like, I got your number, kid. Like, I think in the books too, there are a few points when they also mention that Colin is the most similar to his father. And so I think it makes sense that she kind of makes that correlation between herself and, I think it's Edmund, right? Like being friends first before he plucks up the courage to ask her if she could see more. And so that's a nice little tie-in for book fans too.
Interesting. I didn't know that. Loved when they walked into that ball. Some man asked Portia to see, what was it, like the lamp or something? And she's just like, no. Queen. Yeah, I know. People don't like her, but I feel like she's just working with what she knows. Like, her ultimate goal is safety and security.
Yes. Yeah. I do not condone the way that she treats Penelope. I think it's awful, especially since that's her daughter.
Yeah.
And she's cast her aside in favor of the other two because she doesn't think that Penelope will ever be able to offer her safety and security, to your point. But I also understand that in the time period we're working with, she needs to secure that for herself now that she has no husband and no male heir to take on the title. So her motivation makes a lot more sense when you look at it through that lens, for sure. What do you think about Penelope and Cressida going up against each other? That's interesting because, like, we've seen them butt heads before, but I think that when they're vying for Debling's attention, that's kind of the first time you really see Penelope stick up to Cressida in any way or try and, compete with her.
It's so interesting. I guess because I know she ends up with Colin, I didn't really take it too seriously. I was just like kind of watching. But I do like that she didn't back down. That this season is Penelope not backing down. She is being vocal, standing up for herself, and she's not giving up, which I really liked. And Cressida Like when we get more of her backstory, I see why she's trying because of her own desperation. I mean, they both are just desperate to get married. They're both going out with the same goal.
I think you make a good point about Penelope and not backing down and that kind of showing character growth. I think that like that shows it. And then also, I think this happens towards the end of this episode where she confesses to Debling that she actually isn't outdoorsy, because that's the whole thing. She's just trying to be a version of herself that she thinks that he'll like. And then she's like, just kidding. Like, actually, this is who I really am. And I just felt like I was being dishonest. So I thought I would tell you. I think a lot of this season is her just trying to come into her own without actually feeling like she has to change too much about herself.
So both her and Colin are doing that.
I think they are. Yeah, in different ways. Like they're on different trajectories, but they're kind of on a similar path.
Yeah. And then they find each other in episode 4. Should we move on to episode 4 or is there any more?
I think we have to. Time for the main event.
So episode 4 is called Old Friends. When a caller arrives at her home, Penelope faces a difficult choice. For others, opportunities to build a fresh start and find a love match abound. All right, everyone, this is the episode, the carriage scene. So I did receive some listener feedback when I said I watched the scene a lot. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your Instagram name correctly. It's Reese Mimi? I hope I got it correctly. You said, I have rewatched that scene an unhealthy amount of times. And I totally get it. Me too. Because I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. Pam, oh my gosh. This episode. Where to even start?
I know, this episode. I feel like we should start from the beginning because that would probably make the most sense.
Yes. So we have, I believe in the beginning, we see Penelope being called on by Lord Debling. I think he was he asking permission to propose yet? Or
he was.
Yeah, it's
right?
sometime in this episode. So. But we see maybe not in the beginning, but I know she mentioned like Portia said Penelope's always like sitting on the window seat or whatever. And then we find out later on why.
Important.
Oh, so cute.
Yeah. I also think that like back to the comedic timing of this entire season, it's so funny the way that she says good day to her sisters too.
Yes.
Because they've been like just moments before they're outside talking shit about why a man would even come calling for her, which again, terrible. And then they come in and Portia's like, they just wanted to say good day. And everyone says good day. Then Penelope's like, good day.
I love her. I love this confidence. I love her happiness. She's amazing. Penelope's amazing. Yeah.
She just deserves the world.
She does.
I don't get why people hate her so much. I know that the whistle down thing is a factor, but I just think that like people are way too hard on her. And yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
I loved when John called on Francesca and we see Eloise's reaction about the silence. That made me laugh again. Lots of laughing in these first 4 episodes. And I loved the music sheet, like how he got it rewritten for her, Francesca. I just thought that was so sweet.
Yeah. They're so awkward, but like really thoughtful to each other. And you can tell that her interest is piqued. And I also thought it was so sweet that he took note of that and then he got it transposed just for her.
Yeah. So sweet. It's so funny. This episode, I didn't take a lot of notes because I was staring at the screen. I didn't want to miss anything.
Well, there was also there's that whole scene where Colin goes out with his friends again. And you can tell that he's finally grown bored of all they ever want to talk about is the sexcapades. And then he tries to bat them off, and he says that he doesn't see any gentlemen at the table or something after one of them says, oh, we're not here to be gentlemen. He's like, yeah, I don't see one gentleman amongst us. And I just think that I just loved that because I almost feel like that is the way he should have stood up to them when they were mocking Penelope in season 2. And then he finally basically calls them out on their bullshit and asks them if they want more than whatever this is that they're doing. And it's very clear that they don't and probably never will. But I think that's the moment it clicks for him that it's not his scene, it's not his crowd, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, then he goes home and he has that whole dramatic moment where he also I loved all the bed flopping.
I wrote that down, but I love both of them have done that.
Yeah. I saw this great tweet where someone was like, he's down bad crying at the brothel or whatever Taylor Swift wrote.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. And then I love Violet. She's telling him about the proposal and she's like, it's only a shame you'll miss the fruit of your labors. Love that.
Violet always knows.
She does.
She's so sneaky and I love her for it because it's very subtle.
Yeah, I know. She's so
subtle. That whole scene too where she's like, oh, like, you don't look well. She's like trying to like touch his face. He's like, I'm fine.
I know.
It's such like a temper tantrum, but like in a funny way. But I also really liked that whole conversation that they had at the staircase where she basically says that, you know, she really kind of like reads him out in a nice way and says that he's always putting other people first. And she knows that he's like very sensitive and that he hardly ever shows people the real him. And like she's also been seeing through this act I think it's interesting to me that the three people that have seen right through it from the start are Eloise, because she calls him out on it, his mother, because, you know, who knows their children better, and Penelope, because she knows him better than anyone else.
Yeah, he's a real people pleaser.
Yeah, even his brothers are like, okay, I guess all that traveling finally got to him. They don't really think too much of it. And that's not to say that they don't care, but I just think that they don't really question it as much. But I think it's interesting to me that those three are the ones that like, and they say it at different points throughout the first 4 episodes too.
Yeah. That makes me think I think I was missing more of those brother relationships like we saw in the first 2 seasons. And I think that's really because we didn't have a lot of Anthony there.
I think you're right. Yeah. Because Anthony in the past too has put Colin in his place. Yeah. And I think that if he had been around, he probably would have been doing that. So I wonder if maybe that was a conscious choice as to why they justified not having him there, because it might have resolved things for his character too quickly. And I think that this is maybe a journey that the writers wanted to make sure that he took on his own.
That's a good point.
Like he had to come to his own terms with that.
So let's like jump into the ball and like that whole scenario from that potential proposal and what it leads up to. So we see Debling dancing with Penelope. We know the proposal is probably going to happen. We know that Penelope's hesitant because she is holding out for love. And then Colin interrupts the dance. I loved that. I love that he immediately, well, before that, he had a conversation with Violet where she was saying, like, you just have to ask. Yeah.
I also love that right before he decides to leave, he is sitting in the study and he has the flashback to her holding his hand.
Yeah.
I love all the hands. And are you a hands girl in the Regency romance? I know this is like a big thing where people talk about like the Darcy flex, and the hands always get me.
Yeah. Not as much for me, but I get it. I can see why. I'm more about like the eye contact.
That too. Yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah, and so we see the candle burn out. He has the flashback, and then he goes, and then he interrupts that dance, and he dances with her, and she's pissed off that he's interrupting this proposal. She doesn't even think about what it could be. Like, she has no inkling that Colin's into her at all. She's really moved on since that kiss.
Yeah, she has. And I just think it's because she's decided that it's not possible anymore. So she's like, it's time to grow up. This is like, he's never going to see me the same way I see him. And so like, I can't keep wasting my time. It's funny because like oh my God. Okay. Speaking of music choices here, I'm sorry, I'm fiddling because I wanted to pull up the lyrics. Happier Than Ever playing, specifically like I guess it's like the breakdown towards the end, the back half of that song where like the sound shifts. I think that was like a genius choice on whoever picked it, because if you like watch that scene with, I guess it might be the bridge, with the bridge playing and the lyrics going, it just tells like the whole story.
I love the music in this show.
Yeah.
They always do such a great job.
Yeah. So like this is the line. She says, don't waste the time I don't have and don't try to make me feel bad.
Perfect.
And I feel like that is so Penelope in that moment.
Yeah. So then Colin's telling her not to marry him, and she's like, no, forget this. I need to go.
He interrupts the dance, and Debling like says, it looks like you guys have some stuff to sort out. And then Cressida is the one that clues him into the fact that the Bridgertons live right across the street. She doesn't even realize that she's sabotaging at that point, which is incredible because she's all about she's trying to be better clearly this season with Eloise's help, but she like this is one of those moments where she's sabotaging and doesn't realize it. And that's when you see it click for him as he's watching them.
Yeah. When he was asking Penelope, would you want the feelings returned or anything like that? I was like, oh, I bet Colin's right behind her.
The juxtaposition, too, of Debling being a traveler and, like, his instinct is, obviously I can't take you with me. But then you think, in contrast, like, Colin is such a wife guy that you just know that, like, he would never think about leaving her behind.
That's a good point.
If it was him. Yeah. And that's why it bothers him. So, like, the juxtaposition of those two and, like, those two mindsets to me is really something that stood out. And also the fact that when she asked if, I think this is what you were getting at, if he felt like love could ever bloom from a match of convenience, he said no, because he doesn't have enough space in his heart for more than his work. And so again, it's not that like Colin has no passions. He feels like he has no purpose, but his passion is really writing. But I again, that's something that I could never see him saying. It's like Debling's not a bad guy, but I think that they did a really good job contrasting the two of them as potential suitors for her.
Yeah, and I appreciate how honest Debling is about it. Like, he's not trying to lead her on. He's being very upfront, like very honest. And I mean, if it were to be just a practical match, it seemed like they would be able to make it work.
Yeah. And then like speeding up to that moment when she chases after him, I think that like it does feel more palatable because we have seen this a number of times where they've set up kind of love triangles in Bridgerton where the person rejects one and the other person is like a little bit heart sore, if not heartbroken. And I appreciated the way that they did it this time because there was nothing for Debling to be like hurt over because he was never in love with her and he was just hoping for a good match. But he's not going to go home and like cry about it. He's probably just going to be like, well, that was a waste of time. Let me move on.
And then he walks away. Pen is so upset. And then Portia comes up. Then we see that interaction there. And
I loved that interaction.
Yeah. I think Portia was shocked when Penelope called her out. And I'm hoping to see some sort of resolution between the two of them.
Yeah, that's tough for me because I'm sure that they will resolve it, but I wouldn't like blame Penelope if she didn't want to because it's just, again, like her mother is so awful to her. And going back a little bit more, she even says, oh, don't tell me you're still holding out for love. Like be practical. Like if you're not going to be practical, I'll be practical for you. And the fact that she like doesn't even respond when Penelope says, do I only matter to you if I have a ring on my finger? That's when she should have said, like, I think it's Philippa comes up to her. Like she should have said, Philippa, can you hold on 1 second? Let me make sure that your sister knows that she does matter to me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I'm hoping the resolution will involve some sort of self-awareness on her part. Yeah.
Yeah. And not just like, let me make amends because you're marrying a Bridgerton now and that's security for me.
Exactly.
That's what would upset me.
Oh, yeah.
If she let her do that, you know?
I don't think Pen will. I think she's grown too much in her confidence to allow that to happen. I hope.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. In the book, honestly, you could probably read it out of context. It's a great scene where Colin goes to ask for her hand. And in the books, there's actually 4 Featherington sisters. So there's a younger one. And I think the younger one's name is Felicity. And that's probably why I was thinking Felicity. And she's best friends with Hyacinth. And she's 16. And Portia is convinced that Colin is coming to propose to her, even though he's 33 in the books. And finally, he explodes and he's like, I'm here for Penelope. And she's like, what?
Wow.
She just cannot fathom that he would be there for her at all.
That's terrible.
Yeah, so I'll be interested to see if they play that up in the show and if he also, I mean, like, that would be great because in the books, he was really just like, you, like, from this point on, you will respect my wife.
Oh, yeah. I think that'll come out because we also saw Colin having a little bit of a defense attitude in season 2. Where he was like, oh, the Featheringtons are fine people. Like, I could see him really defending Pen.
Yeah, yeah. But again, like, it's also interesting, too, that, like, you'll have to tell me if I already said this, because I feel like I've been having Bridgerton conversations all week, as one should, on release week. But it's also so telling in that scene that you're talking about from season 2, that they find Colin and Penelope. Her mother finds her with in the study, the door closed and unchaperoned, and this is like the only daughter of hers that she doesn't make a stink about. Saying, well, like, I demand you marry her because now you've like questioned her honor, and neither does cousin Jack.
Yeah, that's a good point. I forgot about that.
Because she just cannot fathom that somebody like him would want someone like her, and that's awful.
It is so awful. Oh.
Completely awful.
Oh, Penelope broke my heart so much. And then
I know, it's okay. She's about to get a happy ending, so it's fine.
Yeah, so then she leaves. She runs to the carriage, and then we see Colin chasing after her. Oh my gosh, the music in the scene. Let's talk about the carriage scene.
Yeah, I was a little like I was not sold on Pitbull being the soundtrack for the carriage scene until, because I saw the song list come out, and as soon as I saw that song, I was like, oh my god, if they do the carriage scene in this part, they're gonna use this, because it was like the most sexually charged song amongst the bunch. But they did, it actually is beautiful. Like, the arrangement they picked was great, and I have like no complaints now.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it was so good. And where do we start? So he goes in, and the first thing he does is to find out if Debling proposed to her. And like, he's so insistent, and she has no idea why he's asking. And it's just, the tension is building up. I loved it.
Yeah, I just think that, like, I mean, he doesn't say as much, but, well, he kind of starts to. I think it's really sweet that he, like, even if it's not with him, he just doesn't want her to marry someone like that, because he knows that she deserves more, again, than someone who's just gonna like tolerate her, basically. Yeah.
And then we get the most beautiful love confession, which I had to write down, so I will read it.
I'm so glad you did.
But these past few weeks have been full of confounding feelings like a total inability to stop thinking about you, about that kiss. Feelings like dreaming of you when I'm asleep, and in fact preferring sleep because that is where I might find you. A feeling that is like torture, but one which I cannot, will not, do not want to give up. And then that's when we move into Penelope saying, like, but we're friends. And you just see the heartbreak in his eyes in those few moments. And then she's like, but I want to be so much more.
Also, like, first, let me back up for a minute here. The way that he's not going to force himself on her, you know? And as soon as the moment he thinks that she's hesitant, no matter how heartbroken he is, and you can tell that he's heartbroken, that he thinks that he's gotten it wrong, that he's put his heart out there, and she's decided that she doesn't want it. And I just think it's incredible that he's like, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, like that level of respect and love.
Yeah, that was so great. But again, like, going back to what we've been talking about for a while now, like, Penelope's bravery really shines through. And I don't think that this moment would have been what it ended up being if she didn't say that. He's waiting for her to respond, because she's in the steering wheel, basically. She's at the steering wheel. Yeah. So for her to say, I'd like to be more.
Oh, I think
we needed that.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Oh my gosh. And then it's just such a good scene.
It's so good.
And then one of the things that I read before the season even came out is that in the carriage scene, the director said cut or stop or whatever, and they didn't hear it, and they just kept going.
They just kept going.
It felt like I was watching a real moment between the two of them.
I know. It was so intimate. I felt like I was like, I shouldn't be watching this. Maybe I should be like looking away. And I think that kind of like, as far as like intimacy scenes go in Bridgerton, there are varying degrees of naked, basically. And I just think that it says so much about this scene that they were hardly showing any skin. And it's like one of the hottest things I've ever seen.
That is so true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when she puts her hands through his hair and like that look he gives, I see everybody like all over is talking about that. I loved that.
Yeah. It's like he can't believe it. And then like the second look he gives her, and then like she kind of has like a mirroring look. Like they both go from like stunned because they can't believe it's happening to like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that we're here.
I know.
That was played out so
Love
well
it.
too.
And then when he starts to lift up her dress and then she nods, like, I love how they use consent in this show.
This is like proof that consent can be so hot.
Yeah.
Because I think that like there's like, you know, the internet is of two minds and people can be kind of shitty and they'll say like, oh, like consent, like it takes you out of the moment. It's not hot. It like kills the vibe. It's like, no, because like we just had a prime example of how you can have that in there. There's time for it, and it doesn't do anything. It doesn't take away from the moment, or any of the hotness.
And we saw that in season 2 with Anthony and Kate. I think Jonathan Bailey is the one who wanted to include that.
The consent king.
Yeah, I know.
They really, I don't know where they're finding these men that are like, let me give you like the best idea for the female gaze that I can think of, and we'll just keep it in.
So speaking of these ideas, Luke Newton, who plays Colin, had his own little tweak on this scene of something that he wanted to include. And I didn't notice it on the first watch, but I noticed it on the second one where he's adjusting her dress with only 2 of his fingers because his other 2 fingers were likely not
clean.
to adjust her dress, and apparently that was his idea.
I know, they really broke the internet with that one. And I have so many questions. I'm like, did you do this every take? Did they like even realize they left that in?
I know. I'm like, how many takes were there?
Apparently, I just read that there were like 6 or 7 takes.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And they just left it up to the edit bay. But yeah, like details like that, like I think that is what makes this feel like one of the most like intimate, realistic sex scenes that Bridgerton has ever produced. And the fact that Luke and Nicola have both mentioned that they were very collaborative with the intimacy coordinator in an effort to make this happen. Like the fact that they were so invested in making sure that this scene was done the right way. Like that's the reason why we have the scene that we do.
And it's so perfect. It feels so real.
And it plays so well.
So good. And it's so funny. I'm watching. I was like, wait a second. This is like Penelope's second kiss, and he's just like going for it. I loved that.
I know. Yeah, I think that going back to the kissing in the beginning too. I just think that like again like the way that this scene is shot and also the way that they react to each other in this scene, such a stark contrast to like these brothel scenes that we get. And it like drives home like the distinction between like, you know, Colin thought that like sex should be like versus what it is like when he's with somebody that like actually matters to him. And I think that is like again like what makes this so good. But like the subtleties of that I also don't think come across unless you rewatch some of these moments,
which I've rewatched like 1,000,000 times.
Yeah, right. But I think that's what the disconnect is for a lot of these people that are saying that they didn't like it. They didn't feel like the character development was good. They didn't like some of the choices they made with the characters. It's like you're not supposed to like some of these choices because the point is that they're not being true to themselves. But when they're together, they're their truest selves.
So I loved like the carriage stops and he's like, "Oh, can we keep going?" And I read that that's a different like that's different from the books. It was Pen in the books who said that. I love that it was him.
I love that it was him too. Also like the laughing.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. That again, like that's one of those moments that feels so true to life. Like, cause sex is like kind of funny and like, it's not like perfect like it is in the movies in real life. And I just think that like the fact that they could laugh about it after.
Yeah, it felt so genuine.
It did feel really genuine.
This season so far has kind of sold me on Friends to Lovers. Because before I was like, Friends to Lovers, a little boring.
So
but I really loved it.
Again, it's like the slow burn in a different way. Like a lot of times too, like the sexual tension it's like one-sided. You think it's one-sided for characters because like they are feeling more than what they think the other person is feeling. But it's usually reciprocated far longer than the other person thinks.
And I thought it was so in character that he immediately proposed to her. And like you could see it in his eyes where he realized it. Like, that was so romantic.
The moment he decided, he was like, I know exactly what we're going to do. Yeah. She said, what are you doing? He's like, don't worry, I got this.
Yeah. Oh,
like,
so good.
It's so good. Yeah. Where do you think that like, where does like Colin's love confession and like, of course, we also have to, you know, understand that this is just like the first one, because there's usually always two, right? There's like in Bridgerton, there's like the love confession, then there's like the love confession. So like, where does this one stack up for you as far as the other ones that we've seen? Because they've had some pretty iconic ones. Like, they're all kind of iconic.
Second, I still think Kate and Anthony, really just something about that really tops it.
Are you talking about the "You're the bane of my existence" and the object?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I guess that's not really a love confession, but
yeah, but that's your fave. Do you know what's so funny is my favorite line, like the one I think is the most romantic from season 2, is when they're dancing in the ballroom at the end and he says, "Just look at me, nothing else matters."
I love that.
It's like, that is like my heart's fluttering.
I know. Jonathan Bailey, he's just amazing.
I really liked the Queen Charlotte ones.
Which one?
I think the where she says, "I will stand with you between the heaven and the earth."
Yeah.
I think that was beautiful, but it's a little too shouty for me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like I think that like with Colin, I think it's so swoon worthy that he basically like said that he's like, I want to just sleep all the time because that's where you are.
I loved it. I think it's just because this might also change with the second half if I change my mind. It's just, you know what I think I love about Kay and Anthony so much is that they're a little bit older, so it felt a little bit more intense.
I totally agree with that. Yeah. They're up there. They're up there for me too. But like I said, the bane of my existence line is not my favorite of theirs. But I do like the fact that they finally, like, I like the way that theirs builds. Yeah. But I find the ballroom scene way more romantic. I love that. That's just me. I'm a big old softie.
Me too.
I don't really like
I listen to Wrecking Ball all the time, just because that's the song that plays during that scene, and I just think of them. I love it.
Yeah.
Let's see, is there anything else from that episode or the carriage scene?
I'm trying to think. We talked about the takes. We talked about the fingers. That was very important. The internet's having a field day with that. And I think I saw on TikTok that Nicola saw a few videos.
Oh, I love that.
Like people talking about it. So they're definitely going to know soon. Yeah. And then we talked about like the intimacy of it. I think that's pretty much it, right? Yeah. I just don't know how they're going to top it. You know, like we have the mirror scene coming up, which like in the books, there is like no mirror scene. He just says that he wants to do it in front of a mirror.
Oh, they're gonna have a mirror scene.
They're doing it for sure. But then you think like, how are we gonna top this?
I read somewhere that they use intimacy to resolve like conflict somehow, or like to work through it. So I'm wondering if like that's gonna like build the intensity of these moments.
Yeah, that would make sense with the whistle down reveal kind of still looming. What do you think about that though? Because like I don't think that there's like a season, like a world in a season 3 where Colin doesn't find out, but I do think that we might see a possibility where like he's the only one that finds out, but like the rest of the ton still does not know.
Yeah, I don't think everyone else is going to find out. And you know, it's so funny, like the revealed, I'm like, whatever, he'll get over it eventually. I don't think it's going to create that much conflict. If there's conflict, I think it would be less about what she's written maybe, and more about the fact that it was hidden from him. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I think he's going to be mostly upset about that. I think it would be interesting if they played into like his insecurities as a writer.
Oh.
Because, you know, he's also a writer, and he freaks out in part when she's reading his journal because I think he doesn't know if he's any good. And then you see him kind of look like secretly pleased later when she tells him, I think like at the park, that it's at the party, right? Is at one of the balls, that his writing is really good and that he makes it look effortless, which is like really hard to do. And you can tell that he's like secretly pleased, but he doesn't want to like let on too much. So like, I don't know if like, I think playing up like some insecurities about that with regards to him finding out that she's Lady Whistledown, and so she's not only a writer, but she's like the most famous writer, even if nobody knows it's her, and she gets paid to do it. Yeah. Like that might be interesting.
I never would have thought of that.
I just don't know how they would resolve that in like 4 episodes. So they probably won't do that. But I do think it would be interesting.
I don't think it's going to be to everyone. I think it maybe just to the Bridgertons, but definitely for sure Colin. I'm wondering what it will mean to her now that she'll probably, like, she'll probably feel more seen as a person. So I'm wondering how much of like an outlet she's going to use like in her writing, if that makes sense. Like how much she'll feel like she needs to do that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I know that one of my friends was telling me that Lady Whistledown is kind of important to Benedict's storyline in the books.
Okay.
And it sounds like they said they already have plans to bring them back for season 4. I don't know if Benedict is going next. I know that would be the fan choice.
Is that your choice?
And I kind of agree. I would not be mad about that. I'm thinking about it in a practical sense, which is that they haven't even started setting anything up for him yet, like they have with Francesca and also with Eloise, right? I feel like they're setting kind of the both of them up a little bit. But with Benedict, I just don't know. I feel like he's stagnant as a character. And I think that's why they need to give him more to do. And the only way to really do that would be to have him go next.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's fine that I agree with their choice to move up the pollen season because they had been building for 2 seasons and they added in that whole part about Colin telling everybody he wouldn't dream of courting her. Like they could not have proceeded after that without exploring their love story.
So what else are we hoping to see in part 2? I know for sure definitely more with Benedict, a little bit more there.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how they wrap that up with the what is she? Is she a baroness?
I think she's a lady
or something like that,
right?
A lady. Okay, yeah, with the engineer fanatic. I'm really excited for the Penelope and Eloise resolve. I think they have to resolve whatever. Yeah, that's the big one for me, in addition to the Lady Whistledown reveal, and then also got to see what happens between Violet and Marcus. Is it Marcus?
No, Marcus, yeah. You're just reading my list.
Oh, okay. We're on the same page.
Totally.
Same brain.
I have hopes, and I don't think it'll happen in this season, but I wrote down I want to see a spicy Violet scene.
Oh, yeah. She deserves
it.
She
does.
She's raising all those kids, making all those love matches.
Yeah. And Pam, I think the most important question that I've been seeing all over the internet is Colin going to wash his hands before saying hello to his family when they go inside?
I don't have high hopes for like hand washing. I think he'll maybe very strategically like wipe them off on his pants.
Yeah.
I mean, like, come on. We saw Anthony go from having sex against a tree to Daphne's debutante debut.
Yep. Love that.
And he definitely didn't have time to go back home and change or wash his hands. So I guess he could have washed his pants, but yeah. I don't know. What's your thought on that?
Funny. I don't think we're going to see that. I'm sure he'll... I didn't even think of that till I saw it on the internet. I was like, wow, people really do think of everything. I'm going to send you a Tumblr post later.
Yeah. So you could just see how deep the fandom is going.
Yes, send it. So I know there's a lot of different plot points that we didn't talk about, but we are very much aware of them. So if anybody is upset that we didn't cover something, you could always email me and we'll be sure to cover it on part 2. But overall, Pam, what did you think of part 1? Were you satisfied?
Yes, and more so after I watched it again. So if you're kind of on the fence, highly recommend going back and watching it a second time with the knowledge of how everything plays out. I think that's really going to alter your opinion potentially. And keep in mind some of these small little details that we brought up while we were chatting too, because I think that really helps put a lot more into perspective. Even like the musical cues, like they used Nick Jonas is Jealous.
Yeah, I didn't realize that till the second watch.
Yeah, that one ball where she's talking with that's the one where she like goes up to the Lord and his horse had just died.
Oh, yes.
And then she talks to the Lord in the wheelchair as well. Mm-hmm. And I think it's so clever that Jealous is playing in the background because you can tell that Colin is side-eyeing that whole interaction she has because he didn't like suggests that she go up to that Lord. And so then all of a sudden he's like, I don't know how I feel about this because I didn't like handpick this person for you. So like the musical cues also add a lot to the story as well. And I think that this is a a season where like the attention to detail is really important.
Yeah, I agree. I watched all of the first 4 episodes the first time at like 9 o'clock at night. So I was up till 2 a.m. So then the rewatch really made a difference. I think I'm going to watch it a third time.
I did the same thing. I started at midnight, a little past midnight, and then I was like circling the carriage scene at around like 3:30 in the morning, which is why I texted my friend and I was like, what's like that? Why is he making clients? Like, what's going on? It's like, this was good, but what's going on here? Anyway, a lot gets put into perspective when you're not sleep deprived and not like rushing through.
Yeah. Oh, man. Well, Pam, thank you so much for doing this episode, because all the episodes I've done of That Nerd Thing so far have really been like interviews and chatting with people about the things they're nerdy about. And I'm just so happy that I was able to talk about something that I love with somebody, and we were able to really dissect it. And that's why I created this podcast, so that I could kind of nerd out. So thank you.
Yeah, this was so much fun. Thank you so much for having me back.
And I'm excited to have you back again for us to cover part 2.
Yeah, that's going to be great. Yeah. And we'll have like the hindsight like everything.
Yeah. Pam, where can people find you?
You can find me online at Pamela Gocobachi at most social media platforms. And then also I co-host a podcast called Millennial with Andrew and Laura, who have also been featured on That Nerd Thing. And you can find links to all the places you can listen to that, all the episodes, our Patreon, etc. at millennialshow.com. Yep. We do politics, pop culture, life stuff over there. So a little bit different from That Nerd Thing, but we still have a lot of fun.
Such a fun show. And it's, it's so funny, as we were recording today and you're talking, I'm like, I feel like if I close my eyes, I'm just like listening to Millennial, and it's like, oh, wait a second, I have to respond back.
Well, we're off this week, so I'm glad I could give you a little fix of the show.
Thank you again, Pam. This was so much fun, and I cannot wait until we cover part 2. And thank you all so much for listening. And please be sure that you are following That Nerd Thing wherever you listen to your podcast, so that you don't miss our part 2 discussion release or any future episodes of That Nerd Thing. If you liked this episode, if you can please leave That Nerd Thing a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you're watching on YouTube, please be sure to subscribe and like this video. You can get in touch with me via email at thatnerdthingpod@gmail.com. And please share all of your Bridgerton thoughts with me. I'd love to hear what you think. And I also would love to hear what you thought about this bonus episode that's a little bit different than a typical That Nerd Thing podcast episode. Be sure to follow the show on Instagram and TikTok at That Nerd Thing Pod. And please share this episode with all of your Bridgerton loving friends. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.